Thank you, Antara. This was very interesting to me listening to this talk about Mendocino County because I live there. And I know a lot of the people that were, or I know a couple of people that were voices here. Where I live, we run a children's camp, and the camp is about circus, performing arts. And the person who, some of you probably know me and know this, the person who is the camp director of that camp, or one of the camp directors, is a clown whose name is Wavy Gravy. And Wavy Gravy's got a lot of Wavy Gravy aphorisms. He's full of funny bon mots and little things that he says. But one of the things that he says that's I think really wise is that if you keep doing the same thing for long enough, you'll become the ultimate honcho of that, whatever that is. And I think that's sort of part of what this last speaker's point was, that there's a certain kind of skill that people acquire when they live with the plant and live on the land, and it doesn't go away just because somebody comes in with corporate money. Because I have reverence for that, I just would like to point out that our next speaker, whose name is Carolyn Garcia, is the author of, I think, the oldest plant medicine cannabis book, the one that's called the Primo Plant. And I think it's probably the best cannabis book, at least of the ones that I've ever seen. And I said to her today, and the cool thing is it's never been out of print since it was first published, and she said, oh yes, well it's out of print now, but I have 500 copies in my garage. So that you can still get a copy of the Primo Plant. It's a really, really good book on cannabis, and it was written by somebody who's been putting in her time with this plant to know it and to love it for decades. And so I think we probably have a lot to learn from her.
The battle of the two microphones, because that one doesn't work and this one does. This is the book. This is the book that I wrote that sort of changed things. My family bought property in the most idyllic spot imaginable in California, which was Stinson Beach. And we were all the way up to the top of the hill. And it had a garden. This is a 1-acre house that cost $60,000 in 1971. This is ridiculously low price by today's standards, because it's now for sale again for $4 million. But it had a great garden area out back. And the dear little old lady who lived there was a rose, and she had roses, and she had an orange tree, and there was a tangerine tree, and so on and so forth. It was quite lovely. And I hired a friend of mine who was a Vietnam vet to help me clear out a lot of the weeds and stuff that was clogging the garden area. And he just happened to have four seeds that somebody had brought back from Vietnam. And he said, hey, do you mind if I plant these out in the garden? And I said, hey, yeah, that's a great idea. What a wonderful thing to do. And so he did, and 4 little plants emerged, and they never got very big, and they made gobs. The 2 that were female made just so many little bitty buds, but pinky size, or one joint of your finger, very small, very tight. Harvested them at the, when it seemed right, and dried it so carefully, and it was just such a precious thing. And then went to smoke some of it, and it was too strong to smoke. My story with it was 1 toke, and you turned into the marble Buddha for an hour. And I had 3 small kids, and this was just not working. So I had to give all of that away. So I gave it away to friends of mine that were in the music business. And that made my reputation for the rest of my life. Because no one had encountered anything like it up to that point. But it engendered a tremendous amount of interest. So my phone rang, and then it rang, and it rang, and it rang, and people called me and said, how big do you make the hole? And then like, when do you plant it? And the absolute basic questions about growing anything. And I found that, after a few days of answering these questions, they'd call back and say, what was it you told me the last time about the size of the hole? And what was it you put in there? So I realized soon that I was getting hoarse, talking on the phone to people who couldn't remember what I told them yesterday. It was already my fault. So I figured I'd better start writing some of this stuff down, just for self-preservation's sake. But right around that same time, I was doing a lot of my grocery shopping at the co-op that was in Larkspur. This is Marin County at that time. And at the co-op, they had a magazine rack, and on the magazine rack was Organic Gardening magazine from the Rodale Institute. So I read one of these, and I was completely knocked out. What it said, basically, was there's a whole other way to approach agriculture, to approach growing any plant, and that way is to work with nature, work with what you have, re-examine what is around you as far as how to promote plant health, and give your full attention to the growing process and the cycle. If you want to learn anything, you can obviously try to grow stuff by not paying any attention to it, but you're probably not going to get very good results. So I had this tremendous opportunity presented to me because I had an eager audience who had already sampled something that I grew, and were really, really, really interested in having more of my product. So I also had, family and little kids. So, and then I also had girlfriends who were also like keenly interested in the results of my research, and they decided they would all help me. So, so it was a feminine collective of growing a knowledge base about what cannabis was all about, how to grow it, how to try it, how to be able to read the signs of the cycles of the plant, and also apply the methods that I had picked up the information from the organic gardening world. So I went all the way on the organic gardening thing. I went all the way to the basic research, which was by a guy named Sir Albert Howard in England, that Prince Charles also studied all of this stuff. And, and previous to that was the Swiss doctor who was against Hitler. What was his name? Come on, you know who he is? So the Waldorf, the guy who started the Waldorf, Rudolf Steiner. So I read the Steiner books, and they're just a ball of fabulous gardening information. It's a little witchy, it's a little woo, but it's true. That's the thing. This stuff is true. So I kind of rejected his overall analysis, of it, the magic and the moon and all that. But I realized that the practicality of it was absolutely right on. So my next year, I decided I would do a scientific imagining a big scientific experiment. I collected seeds from a lot of different seeds, seedy weedy that was going around, because in those days, all weed had seeds, right? You had a strainer on your kitchen counter. All weed went through the strainer, and then you had the damn seeds, and you put them over there. So the seeds started to go into labeled containers, and I began to get a lot more semi-scientific. That served me well, because I was able to then label the seedlings as I grew them out, and I was able to keep track of what each individual type of weed would do in the garden in Stinson Beach, which is like this perfect climate. What I noticed right away was there's tremendous variety in things like leaf size, speed of growth. Aroma was wildly differentiated between Mexican, or I even had a plant from a seed from some South African strain that didn't even like Stinson Beach. It was like too nice. So I had some epic fails, but I had mostly tremendous success with this experiment. I had about 24 plants the second year, and probably 16 varieties, all labeled. and planted on within a couple of days of each other out in the garden as seedlings. So this was all engrossing. It really was a fun thing to do. It's a little harder to do now because seeds have become sort of scarce, and I think that a lot of the varieties have been so epically crossed with each other. It's hard to find these geographically isolated strains anymore. So that being said, the whole idea of trying to write a book about this when so little was known and so little was being written down, and it felt like it felt like a cosmic command to go ahead and save the information and make it available to people. And that took a couple of years. But my girlfriends were great because they followed suit and kept track, and they were growing different strains from what I had, and in various different localities, much closer to the beach or way back in the hot, dry hills, or so we had many different types of results. The concept of growing organically, however, was a little bit harder to convince people of. That I had to do quite a bit of preaching, and the preaching really eventually came from my heart. It no longer was about the Rodales, and because it was, I could see into the way nature works after a while from observation, that the soil is where it all begins. You have to build your soil. Your soil is something that can be improved year after year in a garden situation. And in a pot situation, you really don't want to reuse your soil. You want to go give it to that rose bush over there because it's in a closed environment like a pot. Your soil is going to absorb various salts and minerals out of your water. It's going to, it's not going to be the same as what I would call wild or earth soil, which goes down and the worms come up. So these were big lessons. And suddenly there was a booming, shall we say, a booming marijuana growing effort going on in Marin and Sonoma counties, and which seemed to be, kind of risky because there was a lot of theft, there was a lot of police interdiction. It was the Wild West, it really was. But it was still at the point where people didn't know what marijuana looked like. So you were kind of, on a winning streak there. So the book took on a life of its own, and I finally finished it and did all the rewrites and all that kind of stuff, and it got published. And that kind of let me loose from having to repeat myself continuously over the phone to the same people. So I was able to remove myself from the position of know-it-all, and that was really good. But I do want to mention that the exploration of organic, I'll even call it organic dogma. This is not a bad place to go with your time. It's fascinating. And the more that we learn about soil and structure and the things that live in the soil and what they consume and how to create a thriving soil environment just about anywhere that you want it, this is vital information for growing any plant. This is what will keep your family healthy if you're growing vegetables. This is how to survive whatever catastrophe may be looming above us. We all need to know how to manufacture decent soil wherever we are, and that we can grow stuff and become a healthier, more connected human being. The connection to life itself is something that we all crave. This is a spirit. The spirit of life is the surface level of the earth. The soil level. And you just look down. The spirit of life is right below your feet. It's multitudinous. It's incredibly varied. It's been there for, we're looking now at, what did they say, 4 billion-year-old organisms they've dug up in Australia. in fossil record, you know, there's some kind of magic happened that released life onto the earth. We don't really know, nobody seems to know what the magic is. But the magic is all around us because the results of that, the experiment of, the cosmic experiment of life is what we are. You know, we are that result. We are the result that can communicate, you know, can create schools of thought, pools of, beautiful big pools of fertilizer if we want. Of course the plants are happy about that. You know, we take very good care of them. And you feel a sense, you know, sort of a wave of gratitude coming from both, I mean, I'm sounding kind of silly now, but honest to God, this stuff happens. So waves of gratitude from the natural world that somebody's operating within those structures, within the actual active creative process of nature. Once you become a partner with that, it changes your viewpoint about human civilization, about concrete, you know, about pesticides, artificial ingredients, all of the things that we're surrounded with today, which we have as we're in partnership with concrete and pesticides. And this is, you know, neither of those substances are particularly life-affirming. So the beat goes on with cannabis. You know, going to Egypt was when so I was growing pot for the rock and roll band, so it had to be really good because they could buy anything they want. You know, they could get it from anybody. And so it had to be really, really pristine and gorgeous and smell good and be green. So I worked on methods for all of that. You know, keeping it in a glass jar, not in a paper bag, or, you know, freezing, you know, trying all these different methods to retain the niceness of it, the aromas and the various things. But meanwhile, you know, pot's coming in from all over the world now. And so I didn't really ever sell any except for that second year. I just gave up on that. I just give it away. Anybody that's interested, come on over. You can have some. It just seemed better that way. It was cleaner for me. I didn't need the income, and I wanted to spread the word. I wanted people to understand that even a ditzy dame can grow really, really good weed. It's better than anybody else has. And so, you know, I know that I probably preached a lot, and I'm still doing it. It's okay though, because we still have long lives ahead of us. And we have a lot of opportunities to engage with other living organisms that are too small to see, and encourage them to grow and flourish. And then, by wonderful coincidence, I met Paul Stamets, and in his younger days, and I got it. You know, he started to tell me this stuff about mycelium and about fungus, which I hadn't really considered. I kind of thought of it as you know, something you didn't want to have in your wheat growing soil. You know, it might be a little dangerous. What was it? And he filled me in on what the function of fungus was in soils. And around that point, I began to realize that some of the advice I'd been given wasn't so great, because I had advocated using, you know, some commercial compost, or, you know, wood chips here in the garden. So, you know, I wished I hadn't done that, because, you know, some of those things are not so great. He brought me to a greater understanding of mycelium as a breakdown thing, and it's the final stage of composting. And you really want to kind of get your compost before that happens, because the fungus will eat everything, and you won't be left with much. But, you know, so as allies came into the organic pot growing movement, the knowledge base really spread and got big. And it's so wonderful to hear voices from the past, from, you know, past marijuana experimenters, and hear how, you know, how their gardens did, and, you know, back then when we were all just fooling around with different substances and different ways of growing. I think that the whole thing of the marijuana movement has been such a gift, partly because it brought people together that otherwise would not have met each other. We have an awful lot to say to each other. It's brought us to, healthier children, to a healthier way of living. We've got a tremendous amount of work to do in the sort of the promotional part, especially in Oregon right now, because I live in Oregon and the rules there keep changing every 48 hours. Somebody changes the rules, and it's really making it a little tricky. I'm going to apply for my license this year. I've watched some of the stumbles and the fails, and then I realized, we really are. It's really possible that I could grow some pot this year. Besides since it became legal, I decided to go small because I'm living in town now and I have a small backyard. And so I figured, well, okay, I'll just grow enough for me. And we're allowed to have 4 or sometimes 6 plants in your yard as long as nobody can see it. And so I started with a couple of clones from the pot shop down the street, and I restarted my program in pots. And I decided I'm going to go small. I know how to go big, and it takes a lot of time. And it's wow, they're huge and so exciting, but they're hard to they're hard to diminish. They show up. Everybody can see them. And I had a lot of experience with having my weed disappear during the night too. So I'm a post-paranoid now, and I'm still working through the paranoia that remains from those days. But so by going small, it's sort of antithetical to what we've been talking about here, but it works very, very well. I know how much I need in a year, and it's not a whole lot because I'm older. Weed is much stronger than it used to be. I can get by on far less than I used to grow. So I said, okay, I'll just do 2 plants. So what do I want to grow? So I grew a sativa and a very nice kush called Tahoe. Ooh. Anyway, so I started kind of late, seeds go in, and I did manage to grow from seed, which was hard to do, and I had to find seed, which was by damn, where'd all the seeds go? A pot plant can put out thousands of biologically active starter kits right in your pocket, and people are ignoring that ability to their best. I mean, they're making it not happen, and I feel a little guilty that I told people how to make that not happen, because that's anti-biology in a kind of way. It's too much control. You want your plants to have a few seeds on them somewhere. It not only does it reinforce their femininity, it makes them happier, and you just don't, if you know what buds have been pollinated with just a tiny amount of pollen, you can do it with a paintbrush. If you know which ones they are, just do the bottom buds, and I think it prolongs the vitality of the plant.
And then you can use those seeds?
Oh, sure, but you just have to let them mature all the way. Whereas you can harvest the rest of the plant and just leave the rest of it that has the seeded buds on it until those seeds are fully mature. But this, to me, is really an essence of conservation, is we've got to have the seeds. I encourage everybody, if they're going to grow some pot, for heaven's sake, do some seed work. Not only is it fascinating and exciting, but you're delaying the payoff, for another year. You don't know what you got there. So it increases your attention and focus and sort of dedication to the process of good growing. Again, we heard a lot of information today about possible contamination issues with various types of weed products. Yeah, I've seen with my own eyes fertilizer bags and and gross stuff tossed out by the side of the road in Sonoma County, where growers are getting rid of all their stuff and just tossing it out to hide it, or it's not hiding it, but it's like getting it off wherever it was they were growing. And it's terrible stuff you wouldn't want to use on anything you're consuming. So what's the directive here? We have to be the best and cleanest producers that we can be. We have to continuously look at ways to improve our behavior on the planet as life becomes more and more threatened by all this weirdness that's going on and all the contamination from things we've never heard of and can't spell. We really have to protect our area and protect our right to know and keep our friends in the loop and continue to produce new varieties that are of marijuana that suit our personal little climate zone and our own personal mental climate zone. For me these days, it's changed. And I really like AC/DC in the morning because I get up and I can mop the kitchen floor without, and I'm thinking about something else. I'm very happy. It doesn't have hardly any THC in it. So what does it have in it? Who's looking, Everybody's so concerned about THC and CBD. There might be 50 other things in that AC/DC. I don't know what the heck they are. And like one of the other previous speakers said, preserve your terpenes at all costs. To me, the terpenes are the joy. That's the umami of pot in those delicious aromas. And having been asked to judge at cannabis competitions once, and then behind the scenes one other time. Oh my gosh, what fun! So I don't want to lose that. I want to keep my nose. I want to keep my nose happy and intact, and that is sniffing. I love to smell your weed. I should make a bumper sticker of that. But it's a joy to work with that plant. It's such a sweetheart of a plant. I recommend, probably everybody in this room already has had the experience. Well, good for you. This is what it's about, is engaging with life at the soil level, and at the sun, and the wind, and the rain, and all of those things that bring us to having a really perfect crop at the end of the season. Thank you.
Books here?
There was a couple back there. We're gonna, a donation to WVC could get you one. I should have brought more, but my flight got canceled on Allegiant and I didn't have time to repack, blah, 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 so I only brought 7, so.
I was just wondering if you had experience with indoor growing and what your opinion would be.
No, I have not done indoor growing. It's a completely different thing. But I certainly have many acquaintances who are busy in that field. And but for me, I'm not going to do it. It's too non-connected somehow. It's like being in a spaceship. It's too weird.
In all your years of breeding, selecting, have you narrowed it down to some of your absolute favorite strains, or every year is something
what's going on with strains is really confusing because of the Oregon pot shops. I mean, you go in looking for the one you bought 6 months ago. We haven't seen that since the last time you were in here. So everybody's changing the names all the time now. And I don't really know how to track the genetics at this point. I know there's people that are trying to do that at the various analytical labs, to track the genome and be able to identify the various things. Okay, is that going to help me as a buyer? I don't know. but it sure is fun to go in and just be able to buy some pot. I'm thrilled. I mean, really. When it kind of happened, my daughter and I just ran downtown, you know, at like 2 minutes after midnight and joined the lineup. And that was a wonderful moment, but you know, I feel a little threatened, and I know we really haven't talked about that very much, but yeah, I'm feeling a little sensitive these days. And I think we need to write our Congress people a very definitive letter, a really good letter. Every time somebody writes a good letter, they've got something they can quote to Congress. So, thank you.
Thank you. And one more question. So we're out of books. Where else can people get your books?
Well, you know, it may be that Ed Rosenthal, who was publishing this version, may still have a few. What's the name of their? I forgot.
Quick Trade.
Yeah, Quick Trade may still have a few.
I just found your book on Amazon.
Yeah, and you can get it on Amazon. It'll be, you know, it was a bestseller.